Hello, Pessima Internets, and welcome to this episode 5 of Stairway Mountain Hill Climb, where today we have an ETK rival FR17. Now, as you can see, it is a Formula 1 car, and because of that it is extremely powerful, and I'll just struggle to get off the line here and get the gears right, because if you don't get the gears right, well, there's all manner of ways you can fly off, really. It's just, that is the car's main flaw. You have 900 horsepower going to the rear wheels, and putting it down out of any of the corners, or even around any of the corners, is so difficult. You just have to feather the power so much of the time, and this is with a manual. I'm not using an automatic or something. It is a sequential manual, but not a manual nonetheless, so it's not like I'm forcing the game to do the shifting, at which point it would spin the wheels. Now I have turned ESC off, as I've got that as a kind of rule for the series, so that isn't going to help. It's just too powerful, I think. That's all I can really conclude, although that too powerful does come with incredible speed. As I'll explain a little later, the vehicle is maybe too powerful for me. I just don't have the driver ability for it, but in the right hands, I'm sure you could save 5, maybe even 10 seconds off my lap time with it. Man, I was just sick of it. I even had to redo, for lack of a better term, one of the corners in the course, because the car just spun, and it spun back down onto a slightly lower part of the road. That was not ideal, but so I had to just deal with it and continue on to the finish anyway, since otherwise, yeah, it would have been difficult. But what's another thing it tended to do, if you got the suspension at an awkward angle and accelerated, it could easily spin the car. The bumps will catch you off guard now and again, and it is a very low, very firmly sprung vehicle, so although for the most part it was fine, particularly at higher speeds where the aero was pressing it down, it was not ideal at all. As far as top speed went, I saw 170 out of it on one of the runs, although I'm not sure it was actually doing that. It might have been spinning the wheels up, but either way, the speeds you can hit in this thing are just truly ridiculous. They are eclipsing every other car I can think of around here, and that's to be expected. I believe it's the most powerful vehicle we've had yet. However, what would you expect? I mean, I've said about all I need to say about it now. The twisty corners, yep, I was spending most time in the lower gears, because that, to me at least, seemed the way to get the speed out of it, although there we have the balance and trying to keep it under control. I will say, unlike the Bolide Corsair, though, the lack of turbochargers did make it more predictable, so it has that playing for its side. Now, as far as the specific time went, it was a whole 27 seconds ahead of our previous leader, the Pessima 9 HXT Racing Hill Climb car thing, and a good 30 plus seconds quicker than the Hirochi SBR4. It's not a slow vehicle. It just deserves a better driver, which is something that I am not. So with that being said and done, on to the next vehicle. So, for our second vehicle up, we have a Polo World Rally Championship car, which puts down 284 horsepower to the wheels, 315 I think at the engine. Well, that's the number stated on the forums, but it doesn't show that on the power graph anyway. So, I'm going to call it 284. As we'll see coming up to some corners here, it is a very chuckable vehicle. And as you would expect, it is a race vehicle as well, so it's very good elsewhere. The power is naturally the elephant in the room here. Although it's a lot better than other vehicles I've used, it's clear and obvious that that is the one weak spot. That this car, at least if it had better tyres, could probably handle more. And it really was made to be chucked around a tight circuit though, so even though on the higher speed areas you may say it's not as capable as other vehicles that have crazy high power like the Formula 1 vehicle, I'm never going to be able to compete with that for outright speed. it's still able to hold its own in the corners, and I would hazard a guess this is quick around the corners because of the way you can just floor it on the back end. Even though it might squirm a little, the all-wheel drive will ultimately find traction in the drivetrain and find the traction to get this thing gripped, find the traction to get it out the corner, and find the traction to thrust you towards the next corner. I guess it's got the equivalent of having a very high acceleration rating in Forza would be. You know, your car might not be good at anything else, but just that feeling out of corners once you finally get that grip down, it's just that amazing feeling of power. It's something it provides, surprisingly, despite having a complete lack of power. And as far as ESC goes, I've not seen any ESC on this car. So maybe it's got some primitive version of electronic stability control that I'm not allowed to turn off, but I don't know, really. It's also, I believe, got tighter gears, and this is a tarmac variant, so suspension tuned for tarmac. I'll mention that right now. The time this set was pretty impressive too. Although, as I say, it's not as impressive as the Formula 1 car. You can't expect that level of impressiveness. It's a 713.183, so just over 10 seconds below the SBR4 hill climb. And that is solid enough in itself. Again, remember, the SBR4 was a lot more powerful, so even if this isn't going crazy fast as the top of the leaderboard, which it is anyway, for the power level it's outputting, it really is fighting. It's beat the Sunflower by about 20 seconds, despite coming very close to that for actual power output to the same number of wheels from the same engine location. So, I mean, that has to say something about the handling. I mean, if nothing else does. It's also not bad on top speed. It did over 110 miles per hour, so although not the quickest, not as quick as the, I believe, 170 I once saw from the FR17, it's not bad on that front. But anyway, I've said about all I can say for this car. It is fast. What more do you want to be about it? On to the next vehicle. So, our next vehicle is not an old Chevrolet Corvette, it is the Gavril Vendetta No. 7 race car, and it's got 785 horsepower, all from a supercharged V8 and going to the rear wheels. Well, this is gonna be fun, isn't it? You'll see I have to get the gearing quite specific at the start, as with any of these high power vehicles, and it's just not an easy vehicle to drive by any stretch of the imagination. I guess you could say it's like a Moonhawk NASCAR, only not terrible at putting the power down, and the power it's got is able to deal with a lot better. And as a thing, as a retro race car, it really isn't too bad. You have to acknowledge we've just driven a Formula 1 car and a Polo World Rally Championship car, both of which are significantly more modern than this, and both of which have set very, very good times. This, by comparison, is very primitive technology-wise, and I suspect the tyres themselves may even be from the 70s, so that's not going to help when you're trying to put all this power down. Almost 800 horsepower is a fact, which is about 100 below the Formula 1 car. Still, it's a lot. I did find this to be slightly more controllable than the Formula 1 car, though. Slightly easier to control, at least coming back to it after the Formula 1 car to retake this clip due to recording errors, and I also got quicker times for both vehicles when I were redoing the clip, so that brought things into an interesting light. You know, these cars are so difficult to control, but if you learn them, if you take the time to learn where you can use the power, you can extract more out of them. And this car is no exception. As I say, there's just nothing on the rear. It needs grippier tyres, that's what it really needs, but it just doesn't have that. Now, as far as actually getting out the corners and getting onto the straights, the vehicle was quick. Although I can't say it's as quick as the 170 miles per hour speeds we were at times seeing from the Formula 1 car. No, this is more like 130 miles per hour. Why is that? Well, we have to remember it's going to be a much heavier car, and there's drum brakes on the rear as well, which is making it not slow, perhaps, as well as the Formula 1 car. So, all in all, it's still a very, very fast car. This is still up there with some of the best cars for top speed. It's just the FR17 destroys them all. It's just in a completely different league. It's still along the higher, twistier sections, though. It did get round. I ended up keeping it in the lower gears, second and third mainly here. Unlike the Formula 1 car, I think I spent a lot more time in second gear. And it's really just a case of feather it and hope. I think I said the same about the FR17 even. Feather and hope is just a strategy you use in any of these cars, because otherwise they're just going to end up in a tree or someone's field or flying off a bridge. They're not meant to be on roads this narrow, and as a result, they don't deal the best with it. But having said that, the actual time it set was fairly impressive, but in a different league to the FR17. It is below the Volkswagen Polo as well, and the Hirochi Sunflare, an ETK 856 TT Sport Plus. So we've been beaten by an ETK road-going estate car, essentially. However, that was all-wheel drive, and it did handle far better than I would like to admit, whereas this car doesn't handle far better than I would like to admit. So that brings again into perspective the handling. The other vehicle we've just beaten by 25 seconds is a Brukel Legrand Custom. And at that point, you have to begin questioning it. All this just to beat a Legrand. I just hate the Legrand, even if it is slower. It's at least going to be more consistent with its 500 plus less horsepower. Still, on to the next vehicle. So, next up we have a Basso V10 Pessima from the 1980s. Well, admittedly not a normal Pessima, this is the Pessima Pro car with the V10 and rear-wheel drive. It makes about 600 horsepower, and it all goes to the rear wheels, as I think I just mentioned. As you may expect, it handles like an FR17 Lite. Basically a less powerful version of the FR17 without ABS. It is very, very similar. The suspension, as you'll see, is clonking and bumping about. It was no different with the FR17, though. So although it's not a particularly good attribute to have in this vehicle, it isn't an attribute I can particularly deal with. I mean, this is a very, very fast car, remember, so I guess you need the suspension to deal with what is a very, very fast car. I can't seem to deal with these too easily, but hey, I was at least able to get a better one, I feel, than the FR17. It just feels like a level of power I can actually use, whereas the FR17 wasn't a level of power I could actually use. And again, it is rear-wheel drive on a fairly bumpy course, so it's never going to be perfect when you're trying to force the car up at the kind of speeds I do. The car was able to do 160 miles per hour, so again, a bit less than the FR17, but still, this is just so fast, and it's so far ahead of other vehicles that I've used to drive up this hill. It is not bad at all, and it did make it around the twisties on the higher parts of the course, as I would explain. It's just getting a bit more samey at this point. I wouldn't describe it as a bad car to handle. It's just too much power for the handling it had, really. It also did like to slide under braking, so that's to say that if you brake hard at a corner, it'll tend to slide. It wasn't the biggest deal in the world. I was able to just about contradict it in order to get a good time out of it, but it did become increasingly a problem later on. As of talking about later on still, I was using third gear a lot on the upper parts of the circuit. It just liked it. I say circuit, it doesn't really loop round, so I'm completely wrong there, but it was the gear I found to be useful, I find. Maybe I was in second and first a bit more with the FR17, so just the way it's geared and everything overall, As it eventually got close to the line, I did make a stupid mistake and I lost one of the front wheels, and then I did eventually get it across the line. But I feel very little time lost, so I'm just using that time anyway, because there was about 3 corners left. But anyway, with all being said and done, that's all I have to leave it at. The time is the other thing I need to mention, though, before I'm completely incompetent and forget that. It did do a 6:45.876 time, and naturally that's a sub 7 minute time. It's in the top 3, just below the FR17 and just above the Pessima 9 HXT racing thing. So amazingly, our top 2 cars now are rear wheel drive, and the 3rd place car is all wheel drive. Who would have thought it, eh? But anyway, with all being said, on to the next vehicle. So, our 5th and final vehicle of the day is a Dodge Viper Race. Now this has, well, if I can get a word in, it's got a V10 which has been supercharged, as well as a bunch of race tyres and suspension and stuff. Now there is, I think, race aero, although I couldn't feel it, which sounds odd, but I just couldn't really feel the aero having any effect on the grip of the vehicle. It could just be that it's got too much power. I mean, I remember 845. Somewhere there or thereabouts is what the power it's got, and that is a huge amount of power, and as you'll see, I am struggling to put it round the corners onto the road, and that does not help at all. But more importantly is just how it feels around those corners. It feels big and it feels heavy, and let's be honest, it probably is. It's probably the largest, heaviest vehicle I've taken today. Not of all time, but of this day, it is the 2nd most powerful and the largest and heaviest, and that's not going to help. Now, I never thought this car was going to feel this way. I thought it was going to at least feel a bit lighter with all the modern engineering behind it. But it just doesn't, you know. It feels like an old muscle car, but with the size and weight of a modern car, if that makes sense. Almost as if it's the worst parts of both Pessimas. But it does somewhat have decent traction, and that's about all that it has playing for it. I mean, maybe even the traction isn't that good, but I was just making myself believe that as I took it up the hill. The top speed as well that it hit was, it was hitting around 120, I believe, maybe a little more than that, but it just wasn't near as impressive. It wasn't really beating the, not Corvette, but whatever it was called, around the course. It just couldn't outwit that, outcorner it, outspeed it in any particular way. And as a result of that, yes, it had to struggle around the higher parts of the circuit, as have all of these vehicles. By this stage, high power, rear wheel drive, you expect that. One more thing I need to mention is the wheels. Tiny knocks on the front wheels would damage them. I don't know why, but they would knock the alignment out, and it was so annoying. But it was just tiny impacts that would do that to it in a way that other vehicles haven't. The Pessima Pro car, for example, I could ride the wall just a bit with that, and as long as the bumps weren't truly devastating, it would deal with them. But this, no, they must have got their wheel axles from ETK or something, because they are not strong. Anyway, the actual time, well, the time is a real disappointment because it's an 818.344, which puts it just below the 818.02 that the Covet Tofu delivery set. Above the Covet Tofu delivery is the Miramar Race, the Bolide Corsair Competizione, and the Brucal Ligan Custom. So yeah, we're beaten by a few tunery kind of economy cars, and that is not good. Not good in the slightest. We have beaten the Pessima 3-litre V6 though. But hey, to just about beat a Pessima off the showroom floor by about 7 seconds in a race-built Dodge Viper, it's not much of an achievement, let's be honest. And anyway, with all that being said and done, I guess it has been a short episode because of how difficult these vehicles were to drive. But until next time, I can say goodbye until another day.